Hey friends, it's Melvin. Thanks for tuning into this episode. Here's just a few quick things I wanted to notify you guys about before we get started. First up, very soon, new episodes will be releasing Wednesday mornings rather than Tuesday. So don't panic if you don't see a new episode on Tuesday. Just wait a little longer and you'll see it in your feed. Second, we've introduced a mailbag. Check those show notes and toward the bottom you'll see a mailbag link. You'll then be able to text us any questions you might have about movies, the movie industry, or any movie/Christian related questions you might have. Then we'll respond in a future episode, so send us your questions now. Up next, Patreon polls, which are available to Patreon supporters at the $3 tier or higher, have been updated. Supporters can now suggest films or shows to be reviewed at the end of each month. The two most liked submissions will become the options for the Patreon poll, so if you want to hear us talk about your favorite movie or show, join our Patreon and start campaigning. And lastly, whether you're a new or longtime listener, please consider writing a review or rating the Cinematic Doctrine podcast on iTunes and Spotify. Apart from financially supporting on Patreon, these are the two most helpful ways to support the show. And that's it. Enjoy the episode. Hi, my name is Melvin, and Captain America is way cooler than Iron Man. Welcome to Cinematic Doctrine, a Christian podcast service that seeks to encourage and equip Christians to engage and reform the culture of cinema. In this episode, Daniel and I talk about Joe Johnston's Captain America, the First Avenger. In case you hadn't noticed already, Cinematic Doctrine has been going through Phase 1 of the MCU. And while you'll see we took a momentary break to discuss our Patreon-voted episode on American Gospel Christ Alone, as well as catch up on our monthly segments Trailer Talk and Monthly Movie News, we returned with our review on Thor and are now getting closer and closer to The Avengers. But first, here we are, ready to talk about one more film before the big climax. Captain America, the First Avenger. In this episode, Daniel and I talk about how Captain America the First Avenger's first hour has a lot of fun, clever, and poignant character drama mixed in with creative action sequences, only to boil into the second hour of something completely different. Then we take a look at the history of the MCU and how it came into being, some behind-the-scenes stuff, and how Captain America the First Avenger feels like the last of those early-era films before fully embracing the Disney Marvel writing room. Then, Daniel brings to light some fascinating Easter eggs that permeate throughout the entirety of the film, as well as a few that have some comedic ramifications throughout both the film franchise and the Marvel television programs. Also, and we're not apologizing about this, we have a brief X-Men tangent somewhere in the middle of this episode, so look forward to that. Anyways, as always, on the off chance you haven't seen Captain America the First Avenger, or simply forget what the movie is about, we've got you covered. Here's a quick synopsis I've adapted from IMDb. It is 1942. America has entered World War II, and sickly but determined Steve Rogers is frustrated at being rejected yet again for military service. Everything changes when Dr. Erskine recruits him for the secret project Rebirth. Proving his extraordinary courage, wits, and conscience, Rogers undergoes the experiment, and his weak body is suddenly enhanced into the maximum human potential. However, things aren't quite right when a new foe appears. If you thought Nazis were bad, Johann Schmidt will give you a run for your money, as even he's become too unruly for the Nazi regime to control. And soon, Steve Rogers will have to come face to face with the legacy of those who pursue unlimited power. Captain America the First Avenger is rated PG-13 for intense sequences of sci-fi violence and action. The intense sequences of sci-fi violence and action are based around a super soldier in combat, as well as fighting other soldiers that fit the super category. In fact, that first half of the film has some grounded World War II meets science fiction action where powerful soldiers using electric weaponry fight others with standard, realistic projectile-based weapons. It's nothing particularly graphic, but war is war, so it can still be intense nonetheless. There's also a frightening, over-the-top sequence toward the end of the film that might elicit shock in some and surprise laughter in others. The latter category represents me, but I know that won't represent everyone. Also, the certificate doesn't include these, but the main villain of the film is visually frightening. There are sequences of female gaze where muscular topless men leave the opportunity to be idolized, and a sequence in which characters passionately embrace despite knowing nothing about one another. Now, before we head into our Captain America the First Avenger discussion, I wanted to share real quick that if you come to enjoy Cinematic Doctrine, consider leaving a review for the podcast on your respective podcast app at the end of this episode. Unlike YouTube or Reddit, there isn't really a way to let us know how we're doing with a thumbs up or thumbs down, so the best way to leave your thoughts on the podcast is to write a review on iTunes, Podchaser, or wherever you listen. Apart from that, Cinematic Doctrine also has a Patreon. For those who don't know, Patreon is a website for independent content creators to raise support for their work. By creating an account on Patreon, you can select a content creator you like and support them with a monthly donation. If you enjoy Cinematic Doctrine and would like to support the show, consider donating, as it helps cover the cost of producing the podcast. And as a bonus, if you support Cinematic Doctrine for as little as $3 a month, you're opted into a once-a-month movie poll, where you decide a movie we discuss in the podcast. You also gain access to the Syndoc Pre-Show, a Patreon-exclusive podcast series where my co-host Daniel and I casually talk movies, Christianity, and life itself. There are other unique benefits that come with supporting the podcast, so be sure to check them out at patreon.com/Cinematic Doctrine. Without further ado, here's our thoughts on Captain America: The First Avenger.
We've hit it. We've hit the point where I've been awake for over 24 hours.
Oh no. And now we have to talk about this movie.
I mean, it's not bad. It's not a bad movie.
Yay.
I mean, overall, what movie are we talking about today, Melvin?
Captain America: The First Avenger. I think it was. I enjoyed watching it, but I think the caveat is I think this is one of those unfortunate cases where a movie is it starts out really strong and has some things that are super cool, and you're just so excited to see them develop. Even some of its campier stuff, because Red Skull is just a campy villain. I mean, there's really nothing you can take seriously about him. It's just a Nazi, but turned up to 11, which is fun, as horrible as that sounds.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about this movie is your villains are they're Nazis but eviler.
Yes, yeah. They're Nazis, but they also do not like Nazis. They want more.
They're too evil for the Nazis. Hitler can't control them. Yeah.
Exactly. That's how bad they are. And all of that stuff is really cool. I think it's just a lot of fun how you have things like Captain America does a stage show, reluctantly, but it's how can you help your country? Well, be an entertainer, which is just so funny to me, because I think it's bottom of the barrel humor to be make fun of the people who aren't going to war and think they're actually contributing to, which they are. That helps your morality, that helps why do you do the things you do? Well, so you can kind of go home and relax and be entertained and stuff. And so, which obviously isn't, I'm not making some sort of declarative worldview statement there. I'm just saying functionally, I go to work so I can come home and relax, but better.
Yeah.
So that's all kind of fun how it kind of camps that up. I think the character drama starts out really strong. Steve Rogers, just as a character, is an endearing character, and I think he stays endearing throughout, which I think is pretty impressive, that pretty much from start to finish in the entire franchise, he is just a very endearing character.
Yeah.
He never really loses that quality, even as he grows up, not just as a character, but also grows up with a serum injected into his body that turns him into Chris Evans. So, which also, by the way, that CG early on, that's pretty good stuff. When they make his body look skinny and small and meek, that's some really good effects. The only thing that threw me off was that his voice is still super deep like Chris Evans, and you're no, those lungs can't do that.
Yeah. I feel so we're recording this after we did the Incredible Hulk episode, obviously, and I kind of feel like that was, man, I think that's the worst episode I've ever done of this show.
We had nothing to offer because it's one of the worst movies we've ever talked about.
I think so. I think it's up there.
Sonic the Hedgehog had more to talk about. And it was also just more entertaining to talk about than the Incredible Hulk. But Incredible Hulk was just a miserable time throughout our entire time working for that episode. For me, at least.
I agree. And I think part of it is there was no real plot to describe of any kind. The entire plot can be summed up as Hulk is somewhere else, then he's dragged back to the place, and then he tries to get with girl, and then he gets caught.
And then he goes back to somewhere else. So
Yeah,
like nothing's changed.
But Captain America has it. It almost feels like two movies, and this is a thing that I have. This is a running criticism I kind of have with a lot of the early MCU films, and I think they do a better job of this as it goes on. But there's almost, you can kind of almost feel this tension between two different visions of what the movie should be, where there is this really kind of interesting period action film where you talk about all the best. I also agree that the best stuff is early on, where they do a wonderful, absolutely wonderful job of establishing Steve Rogers as a character. And there's great stuff where he really wants to go into war, and he says what I think is one of the most iconic lines of the entire MCU, as it sort of sets the moral fiber of all these superheroes. Where Stanley Tucci's character asks him, so like, because he's attempted to join the military 4 or 5 times and he gets rejected because he's a comically small man. Who has like asthma, and there's a brief shot you can see all of his different issues. He's asthma and high blood pressure and all these other things.
Everything that you could have that like won't kill you but makes your life significantly harder is that's his body.
Yeah, his body's just riddled with the dreaded pre-existing medical conditions.
He is living the hard mode.
Yeah, he was born on hard mode, and he gets getting cranked up to expert. And with Stanley Tucci asks him like, so like what? Like, you want to go kill Nazis, huh? And he's like, I don't want to kill anybody. I just don't like bullies. And it's just like a very simple morality of, I do not want to hurt people. I'm not in this to fight, but I dislike injustice, and I must do something about it. And that simple, charming morality is sort of what permeates this entire movie. And that's what sort of sets, to me, Captain America is sort of the moral center of the entire franchise, where then you see him go into war, and Tommy Lee Jones is there, and Tommy Lee Jones is playing the Tommy Lee Jones character, where he's just this like rough, angry man who's like, we need a big, tough soldier guy. And there's another great scene where he's trying to prove a point to Stanley Tucci, so he throws a grenade into a group of people, and everyone dives out of the way, and Steve Rogers jumps on top of it. And he's not even at war yet. He's ready to sacrifice himself for his fellow soldiers. And obviously it's a dummy grenade and all this stuff. And there's all these like great little scenes like that where they're building this character. And then once he actually becomes Captain America, they do an actual clever thing where he becomes just a propaganda symbol, which is one of the most brilliant ways to integrate the original comics, where like they print out the original Captain America comic as like a piece of propaganda to like drum up interest in the war, and he does all these cheesy movie reels. And this is all pretty clever, dense stuff for a Hollywood blockbuster. And then at some point it just becomes a superhero movie.
And like a bad one, because like it's got exciting action sequences even in that first hour, which by the way, it almost is the exact first hour ends and like everything kind of falls apart. But like there's an action sequence right after Steve Rogers becomes, jacked and becomes basically what everybody wants to be if you're a man, and everybody wants to be with if you're a woman.
Right.
And it's just like he has this great chase sequence where after this happens, a double agent is there, and he's a German spy, and he grabs the last vial of the serum and runs away. And it's important because it's the last vial that can be used for replicating it. And, the Germans want it, or Red Skull wants it, because it's the perfect version of what he himself has gone through. And, Steve Rogers chases him through, I guess, Brooklyn. I mean, are they back in Brooklyn? I can't even remember, but it's this great
old-timey New York.
Yes, old-timey whatever city, really.
Yeah.
And it's just a really fun runaround scene. You have the tension of like, this is happening, where citizens are too. So, because a lot of like, as things continue, it gets to the point where like, it's just sort of like no items final destination after like phase 2. Like everything just turns into flat area where people fight. So it's just exciting to have it set in like a populated area, and it's a good sequence.
And he doesn't know how to use his powers fully yet. He doesn't realize how high he can jump. He's like literally skids off the road and like crashes through a giant window, and no scratch on him.
The sort of thing that like excuse you have when like you accidentally hurt somebody and you say, I just didn't know how powerful I was. Like it's just great. And it's a really fun runaround action sequence. And then the hour point hits, and Daniel, I don't know if you you felt this transition too, but on the off chance that you did, which scene do you think was the turning point from like good hour of quality and bad hour of just kind of camp?
For like from your perspective or my perspective?
I'd actually be curious if both of us had the exact same sequence or around the same area. But for me, I just want to see what you think. Is it because these all happen around the hour-long mark? These all happen
Okay, so
around like when this happens.
multiple
With
choice.
multiple choice.
Okay, how many guesses do I get?
You get however many guesses make it seem like you don't know the answer already because I messaged you online.
Okay.
Is it the scene where Captain America was seduced by some random nameless secretary that is there just as a sex icon?
Played by Natalie Dormer of all people.
Is she in other? I don't recognize the name. Is she in
really?
Other stuff?
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's
Maybe
in Game of Thrones.
but...
She's in Penny Dreadful.
Okay, I don't watch a lot of television, so
she's she's in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I don't watch a lot of television, so I wouldn't know.
I was shocked to see her in this. I was shocked. I was like, I remembered like, oh, this is also Jenna Coleman, who's in Doctor Who, is in this movie.
That
for like
I do remember.
Seconds.
Yeah, she looked really familiar. Was she was in kind of the end of Matt Smith Doctor? And
yes.
Really,
yeah.
But yeah, was it that scene where Captain America is seduced by a random nameless secretary who now has a name and is in TV shows? So just so that Agent Carter can walk in on it and be jealous, was it this is option B, because now we're lettering them. Is it the random action sequence montage where we just watch Captain America win a bunch of fights but don't actually get to see them? Or is it the entire rush train sequence just so we can have emotional weight come in at the very end? Which, if anybody's, I mean, we've already kind of spoiled a couple things, but we don't need to spoil this one. But just this incredibly fast scene that's supposed to have emotional weight and then cuts away.
Honestly, like, for me, I'm just going to speak for myself in this case, but I mean, I would assume the montage is both something I enjoy and don't like at all, because on the one hand, I would like to see more of just Captain America and his band of quirky soldiers just doing missions, but like the way it's pulled off is not very, dare I say, cinematic, where it looks like just a bunch of kind of like almost completed effect shots strung together. But I know that you have a particular dislike for this. Captain America kisses a woman that has had no lines up to that point in the movie, and then has no lines after that scene in the movie.
Yes.
Natalie Dormer of Game of Thrones fame.
I bet she's very proud of that.
Probably not.
I was in Captain America, the First Avengers. What would you do? I just was the other woman for one scene.
That's like kind of dropped. They don't really... There isn't like a scene after that where Captain America is like makes amends in any way. There is like kind of a fun scene where Peggy Carter is like very upset, and this might be just because Haley Atwell is a very charismatic actor, but like I found every scene with Peggy Carter to be pretty good because she's really good in the movie. And that's actually a running thing with Marvel movies where they have incredible casts. Like there is just an incredible assortment of talent on screen to play even the most like menial like secondary characters. It's really amazing when you just look at these casts. You have Tommy Lee Jones, Stanley Tucci. I mean, Chris Evans was a good actor. He wasn't super well known. Haley Atwell, Dominic Cooper's in this. Neil McDonough is Dum Dum Dugan. Just great acting.
Which you are right, by the way. It was that scene. I think like that was the transition point for me where I was like, this movie has expended all of its good character drama.
It's given into cliche, yeah.
And it's decided that the next thing it needs to do, because the only way you can have drama amongst a relationship of characters is to just have your lead character kiss another woman. Which, by the way, you could do that in good drama if this was a film where Steve Rogers was having to struggle with the fact that now he's taken a serum and becomes the top dog and like becomes toxic in that way.
Yeah.
But like the whole thing is that like he doesn't, and that's a good thing. So it just feels weird. Like I was like, I don't know if you remember like the scene well, but like, and I even say that knowing that you just watched it last night, because like some things, like once a film gets bad, you just start to forget things. Like it's just a fact. But like, do you remember how the music plays up that scene at all? The
No.
music is like, it's like the sort of tragic, like intense music you would hear when like you're expecting her to like shoot him. It's the sort of thing like in do you remember War for the Planet of the Apes? Was that the one that is set after the James Franco one, or is which one is that? The
Rise.
second one of the three
Yeah,
movies.
Rise.
Basically, there's a scene where like you know that based on the music cue that something is going to happen, and it's supposed to be a tense scene. Like if it had no music, it would be tense because you really don't know what's going to happen. But then the music plays, and it's whimsical music, and so you don't have any tension anymore. It's just a funny scene, even though it's an interaction between two characters that if they knew what was going on, they would just shoot each other. And then the next time they do the scene, they don't play the music. And so immediately before the scene ends with the way that's supposed to be, you know, okay, this is when he's going to do the whole shoot thing. And the way this music plays during this weird scene is almost like, it's almost like this other woman is like the biggest threat this movie has ever had. And it's really strange. Like I would even say, like, if you're listening, just skip to about an hour in and just like play the scene, and with like no context you would think this woman's going to become like a huge villain, and then nothing really happens except they kiss, she disappears, and is never in the entire franchise ever again.
No, yep.
And it's like,
Never seen again.
which is just, you know, classic Hollywood. Classic. I don't know. It was just like a really dumb scene. And I feel like that was the pivotal point. That was like the hinge where like everything after this movie is just a mess.
Yeah, I don't know if I would like look to this scene as some sort of like turning point necessarily in the movie, but I around this time, like I mean, this scene I found inoffensive and but not my favorite. Like I was just kind of like, it just doesn't go anywhere, and that was kind of more my disappointment with the scene. But because I mean, if you're watching the first time, you would assume that this would lead to some ongoing conflict between him and Peggy Carter, and there just isn't. There's one scene where she's upset at him, and then it turns out that's right, we're in the middle of World War II and we're fighting Hydra. So then they just get on to more important things. And there is admittedly a nice scene later on where he's talking about like he's dealing with the weight of war, and he's actually back at a bar that earlier they'd been partying in and now has been destroyed, and he can't get drunk because he has superhero serum, and he's struggling with the weight of some of the things that happened to him, and that's like a nice scene. But it is this point where the movie just, it felt like someone was like, movie needs action, huh? We need some action. And like, because it's a character driven film where like the best stuff is watching Steve Rogers struggle with what it means to be a hero, and there's this awesome like action sequence where he's rescuing all these people who've been captured by Hydra, and then he returns to the base after everyone thought he was dead, and that scene's like very uplifting. And it just, this movie hits all these like simple notes really well, where you just can't help but cheer for Captain America because he's just such a pure-hearted, perfect human being almost. And then the movie just has to have action, and you just get a sense that like the people involved in making the film didn't really want to put it there, and so they just killed time before they got to the final third act, where there's a big siege upon the big bad guy base because they have the big bad guy weapons, and then there's more action, and then the movie has what I feel is a genuinely effective downer ending,
as in like an effective tragic ending.
Yeah, where like I felt bad. And it's interesting because the movie understands that this scene, like, I mean, I feel like it's weird to just jump right to the end of the movie right now, but for those who do not know, Captain America does not stay in the 1940s and does in fact end up in modern day to join the Avengers. And the way they do this is his plane goes down and he gets trapped in the ice, which like the tragedy of this scene isn't that he's dying because he's Captain America. He doesn't die. It's that he's now separated from the woman that he loves, and there's nothing he can do about it. And that's just sad. And like,
yeah,
there's no silver lining to it. It's just, that's it. These two people that love each other, and she cared about him before he became Captain America. And there's all this like great stuff early on where you can tell she like admires the person that he is and all that great stuff. So that's genuinely effective.
Yeah, it's one of those cases where like you're reminded that whoever's writing has a really good idea, knows that the linchpin of the story is Steve Rogers as a character developing as like, not only he already embodies that purity and that hope for the future and justice. Now he's just in a position where he can handle it.
Right.
Before he couldn't. Like, he would just get beat up in an alleyway, and you have a really sad scene where he's just like, I remember this alley and I got beat up, and I remember that alley and I got beat up. And like, it's only like funny in this like
Sad.
I could see that being very funny and a cynical satire. Like, that to me is quite comical. But it's also sad because, like, you know who he is and he represents, and the fact that he is just like the little guy. And so, like, it's just one of those cases where now he gets to carry that weight. And like you said, you have that one good scene in the in the last hour, which is only like one of two good scenes to me that like really works in the last hour, where he's in this bar that is a clever use of setting to tell a story. Because like you said, like, this is a bar they partied in and had fun while they were like in the middle of war, and now it's destroyed, which just represents like the loss of joy that you have in war. And he can't even carry the weight with the added delusion of like, if I can just get drunk, then this would be better. And so now he has to just keep enduring. And like, those are great character like ways of basically saying, this is what Captain America is. He's pure and he becomes powerful. And then saying, what are things we can put in opposition to that, and how does he react? Like, that's usually how a good character drama goes. And even a good just story goes is, here's the one thing that's interesting. What are the 10 things we can put in opposition to it? And at some point, they just get tired of it. And they decide, you know what's cool? A completely CG animated scene where characters drive a convertible down like a runway that's in a mountain. That's cool. Like, this is really boring. Like, there is no character drama here. There's really nothing intense going on, because like nothing looks real. So even my ability to suspend disbelief is gone. It's not one of those situations where this will be kind of a weird comparison, but it's not like a Speed Racer situation where everything is fake and therefore I accept that this is the world I live in.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Because everything's pretty grounded until the last scene where everything gets so CG ridden that like it's just not real anymore.
Yeah, and I couldn't help but compare the action in this to the action in later just Captain America films, where they've really, and I've mentioned this before, I'm a huge choreography guy. I'm a big martial arts fan, and so I like to see like real staged hand-to-hand combat. It's like either overly stylized or very realistic, one of the two.
Len Kavizinski fan, for the two people that understand that reference.
Yes, big Len Kavizinski fan. Can't wait to see him and Leo Fong in a movie together. But when you watch like Winter Soldier, there is incredible like hand-to-hand fight scenes, like knife fights, and then the fight scenes just keep getting better and better throughout the franchise. And then here it's very like, and we're gonna get into this a little bit about some of the technical aspects or the behind the scenes stuff in the film, but like very old school American like 80s action, early 90s action film thing, where you just have a big dude who just hits a guy real hard and he goes flying somewhere, and he throws a guy, where you don't have time for all this choreography nonsense. You just have big massive dudes like hitting people real hard.
And like, the best example of that, not just even hitting people hard, but also big guns. What's that? Which is, I know I'm like saying best example, and I'm about to ask you what the movie title is, but what's that movie that ends with the guy on the ground and he picks up a bazooka and shoots somebody, and like he blows up, and then the credits just freeze frame and roll? What's the?
I
can't remember, but it's
where
so
I just roll the
good.
credits roll of the scene. It says like, this man was sent to jail for all this murder he did.
Even though we just watched it blow up.
Oh man, it's not low blow. It's blood debts.
Is that what it is? Because Low Blow is the one where
with
the
Leo
end credits
Fong.
is and the end credits is him turning the car on, but it doesn't turn on.
And the car won't start. Man, guess what internet YouTube show we are a fan of?
If you can figure it out, I'll just give you all of our Patreon money for 3 months.
Please don't do that. This is great niche referencing we're doing.
That's how you get listeners. You really target a niche, and only the 6 people who know can actually support you. Moving on.
But yeah, I wasn't a fan of like the heavies. They looked like the any if you play any video game where there's like the regular goons and there's bigger goons that you have to stun, then like do some combo move on them or hit a melee move. There's just all of those in the movie where like it's a guy in like a big suit who has 2 guns on his hands.
Instead
So he
of
has like a
one.
flamethrower. Yeah. So he has little mini boss fights before he has the final boss fight against Red Skull, you know. And that's really overall the action sequences are straight like, and this will be a thing throughout a lot of the Marvel films is the action sequences are when I kind of start to tune out because they're not particularly exciting in hindsight based on what we see in later films. And I just really like these characters. I'd really like to see the characters do things, which I know like you can have characterization through action and all this other stuff. Like the John Wick films do a great job of that. But I just wanted to I want more scenes of Captain America talking to Peggy and talking to the Howling Commandos and like having just debates with Red Skull. Like that stuff's really good where you start to see like the inner good guy in Captain America and you contrast that with just the cartoonish like evil of the Red Skull. And I found all of that stuff like really, really charming where, I mean, do you mind if I start getting into some of the technical nitty gritty here?
Yeah, go ahead. I don't need to continue my stuff.
Okay. One of the things I really like about Captain America, the First Avenger, is I like the setting. I like that it takes place in what is clearly a different time than the rest of the Marvel films, where one of the big knocks against later Marvel films is they all kind of just seem like the same movie with different things switched out. Same basic plot, same basic setting, all the special effects sound like the same. And I kind of in a way blame the Joss Whedon's The Avengers because he had such like kind of like a bland visual style and that sort of set the tone with the rest of the franchises.
At least with Phase 2, because I really do stand by that Phase 3 really targets a lot of the issues that come from, like you said,
Right.
the Avengers. Because like you'll hear about this when we talk about the Avengers, which by the way I'm probably recording in the next 6 hours. But it's funny how time worked that way. But it is one of those cases where like his movie is shot like a TV film. Daniel and I talked about this prior, and it's just like it doesn't really have any sort of character. But when a film that's easily made, I shouldn't say easily, but like has a style and makes $1 billion, your plan is to imitate that style. Because like Captain America, the First Avenger is like, we talked at length about like how this movie turns into like just schlock and stuff. But like the first half has such characterization and fun to it. And that I feel like I was watching this and I was like, man, this is like the last time I'll feel this way until Guardians. This is the last, like I have to get through like 6 more movies now to get to Guardians on these reviews to be like, finally a breath of fresh air. And even another warning that Daniel told me off the record was, you're going to get tired of these movies very soon. And even in my notes for Avengers, I wrote down like, am I tired now? Like, did it happen? And so, yeah, I don't know. I forget why I brought that up, but go ahead.
So Captain America is, it's somewhat historically significant in a weird way because it sort of marks the end of what was sort of the original idea behind the Marvel live action films. And this is a little history for those who aren't aware. Sorry we waited till this many movies in to start talking about this stuff. But back in 2004 was when Marvel decided to start self-financing and producing their own movies. Previously, Marvel had just been licensing out the more lucrative like characters and franchises out. You know, Spider-Man went to Sony, X-Men went to Fox, Hulk went to, I believe it was Universal. And those movies ended up making a fair amount of money, especially beginning with New Line Cinema's Blade in 1998, which turned in pretty profit on a relatively low budget.
And then even X-Men, like the first X-Men movie was huge, which is weird when you go back to watch it because it doesn't
it's not
really
great.
It's just really a mess. Like,
it's
what is
very
it?
2000.
What happens to something gets electrocuted? The same
Struck by
thing
lightning.
that happens to
Yeah.
everything else. And it's like, who wrote this?
Oh, man, does X-Men not age well?
Sometime we're gonna do that. We're gonna do all these X-Men movies.
Do all the non-MCU Marvel movies. We're gonna
like
watch
X-Men 2,
Man-Thing and
X-Men 2 is pretty good.
I like X-Men 2.
I think like that one. I remember holding up, but
that one just has the benefit of having a semi-decent screenplay. Like X-Men ages so bad.
And then 3,
it's insane. And X3, ages a little better by purely just because of how kind of off the rails it is a little bit. That's kind of funny how that works out. X-Men is weird, where every other X-Men movie is like the good one. Like, okay, X2, and then
Until the last two.
yeah.
Well, wait.
X,
We're doing this mini tangent. Was it Apocalypse and then Logan and then Dark Phoenix, or was it Logan, Apocalypse, and then Dark Phoenix?
So Apocalypse, then Logan, because Apocalypse has
so it does hold up. The every other rule, the rule of law works.
You have First Class,
yeah,
and then
Days of Future Past and First Class were after each other, and those are supposed to be solid.
So it was like First Class, then you had the Wolverine.
And then Days of Future Past. Never mind.
And I think the Wolverine is okay for certain things about it, and it's weird because like Logan, I talk about this fairly regularly about how like some movies just speak to you for whatever reason, and as someone who grew up watching westerns and all that stuff, and as a red-blooded male who just thinks who just like there's something about watching a man heroically just get destroyed physically because he's protecting someone that just clicks with a lot of guys. And man, is Logan kind of like the ultimate like zeitgeist catching version of that movie.
Or Drive, or the elevator scene in Drive, where you're just like, I love this.
Yeah, Logan just speaks to me. It's just Logan's probably my favorite superhero film overall, but Logan puts all of the other Wolverine movies into a singular continuity. It's very weird. Where there's even a cut scene where he talks about the events of X-Men Origins Wolverine, which I can see why they would cut that.
Was it the scene where he fights Gambit and he just basically cuts a ladder up a lot?
No, he talks about fighting. He talks about fighting Sabretooth on top of that giant whatever building gets blown up
nuclear
by
thing.
Deadpool, silent Deadpool.
Silent Deadpool.
Yeah, that movie's weird. And like X-Men Apocalypse has like a post-credit scene that's supposed to set up Logan, where Mr. Sinister is supposed to be the villain. Which Google Mr. Sinister and take a look at that guy, and you'll see why James Mangold and Hugh Jackman decided that would not be a good-looking villain for their very serious prestige movie. You imagine a more like Thanos with more stuff on his costume, if that makes sense.
Flamboyant like Kafka. Where you're like, that can't be a villain, and you're like, oh my gosh, no,
Mr. Sinister would be kind of a fun villain though for like a different movie where like he has all these different like robots he controls and stuff.
But returning back,
what was I talking about?
So you were talking about like the importance of like classic like Blade and stuff. Okay, so anyways, going back.
So obviously Marvel did that because they were like going bankrupt, and so because they made all this money slices got the movies, they were like, oh, so why don't we just make our own movie? So in 2005, Marvel acquired a $525 million loan from Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner, and Smith Inc. And they did it using the film rights to their own like properties as collateral. So if these movies had tanked, some like firm, some like you'd be having dudes on Wall Street making Marvel movies. And so they, as I just mentioned, they had already given out all of like their good juicy bits. So Spider-Man, X-Men, that's all gone. But there were 10 announced possible properties. These are the ones they put it for collateral / movies they're actively trying to produce. Melvin, what were the 10 properties they put up for collateral?
I would assume it's the first, like looking at phase 1, it would be those movies, because at the very least, if they work, then they know like not only do we make movies that, you know, we wanted to of these characters, they were also successful and they can use them as testament for getting other characters back. So I would definitely add, you know, Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man and all those characters. And then I guess thinking back to the fact that Iron Man 2, thinking back to the fact that Iron Man 2 has that map at the end that kind of describes, you know, like here are other characters, which is, by the way, this is like a light Easter egg, but there's a map at the end of Iron Man 2 that shows that S.H.I.E.L.D. is in interaction across the world, and one of them is Wakanda, or at the very least in Africa, so you assume it's Wakanda. And then there's even one in the middle of the ocean, which I had to look up, and then my wife schooled me on Namor and said it's the emo Aquaman, and I was like, well, that sounds cool, because what a good counter to the current Aquaman we have, which is just like, dude, bro. But it'd be the Aquaman who listens to the Smiths. He's just It's just,
Yeah,
but
I think I may have. I don't know if I said this in our recording of the Incredible Hulk, but I've previously, at least in conversation with you, made a comment about how like Namor is like their response to Aquaman. Namor predates Aquaman. I found out.
oh wow,
Yeah,
I would assume then that Black Panther might have been in that plan as well as Namor, just based on what's referenced that are big characters. But like thinking again forward into phase 2 and 3, it's almost more like they almost took a sigh of relief and said, okay, we can depend on these characters to actually keep us going. So I'll cut it off with the saying like, the phase 1 heroes and then Black Panther and Namor. Am I like 50% right? What am I landing on?
you're shockingly wrong, but
Oh my gosh.
Black Panther is correct. So
That's so bad. Like you were endearing in your answers, but everything you said was inaccurate.
your logic is really strong. But so one of the things that I found out in doing a little bit of reading is that after they made this announcement, they then got back the rights to some of other people that they had leased out, which included Iron Man and Thor. They actually did not presently have the film rights to those characters. The 10 properties, and I say properties because some of these are not single characters, that they had planning on putting in production were Captain America, Black Panther, you're correct, Nick Fury, Ant-Man, Cloak and Dagger, Doctor Strange, Hawkeye, Power Pack, the Avengers, and Shang-Chi.
So they just straight up put the Avengers like you could you could make a movie from it, but
Right, that one was the most shocking to me. I was shocked that Power Pack has weirdly been in some form of production forever. Like occasionally, if you're somebody who follows this kind of news, you'll hear rumblings that Power Pack is someone has been commissioned to write a screenplay for Power Pack.
Define Power Pack.
It's a group of children superheroes. I have no interest in seeing that. I'm sorry.
That could be fun if they went the Amblin route.
Like Shazam, right? Oh.
Or Shazam would be cool, but like even the Amblin route where you made it like a ragtag bunch of teens that are enduring like, bad parents and like the real world. I could see that being fun.
Or like they get mad, their parents will let them make TikToks. So then
yeah, that's right.
You darn kids.
Their parents are in the military, so legally they can't even have TikTok. But like if you were to capture that could work. But I think like the thing that's funny about like Amblin Entertainment stuff, and then of course anything that is influenced by it, so like Shazam and most notably Stranger Things, and then straight Super 8, is that they have to be willing to like have children be the way that like they are when they're kids, which are basically horrible
monsters.
Constant language and like you can't, or goodness, I was even thinking about Summer of '84. Have you seen that?
No, I have not.
Summer of '84 had, first off, it's a very creative depiction of like the milk carton culture, which was basically like when people started to realize that like child abduction was like actually a thing that existed and we need to be much more apparent about it. But you'd have to be willing, like Power Pack would have to be willing to be talking about things like that. Like, and I don't think Marvel's ever going to go that route, because that would be really hard. Like, I remember this almost sounds tangential, but it's related. I remember playing Bully like at my house when I was younger, and my mom was offended because she was like, I don't like that like these kids are being so mean to each other, which is, it's a like, I understand.
That's
like I was playing it
just wholesome.
It is, and it's really nice because
the world your mom lived in, apparently.
Yeah, and I thought it was sweet because I understood why it was offensive, because it's like Bully is all about kids that bully each other at a school and they're doing terrible things to each other. It's just GTA, but at a boarding school. And in fact, when that game even came out, there was a big like Moms of America thing against it.
Yeah, I remember all that. Yeah,
you couldn't Power Pack. I understand why that's on the back burner, and especially post phase 3. Like, I just could not see them. I could not see Kevin Feige committing to like doing that ever.
I can't help. I have no confirmation of this, but I can't help but feel like part of the reason that we haven't gotten a Power Pack movie is that they can't figure out like a formula for make a movie about children's superheroes that's simultaneously compelling for adults, but like appropriate for children. But like I kind of liked this original vision where we're going to have MCU stuff for everyone. There's going to, like, we eventually had TV shows, and we'll have MCU stuff for children, we'll have MCU stuff for adults, but it all still connects like a cohesive universe, like the comics. And that's part of the interesting about this original list. All of these films went into some form of production after this announcement. And the Nick Fury thing became a S.H.I.E.L.D. movie, which then became the TV show. Cloak and Dagger eventually ended up being a TV show. Hawkeye is now going to be a Disney Plus show. And then some of these actually did end up becoming movies. This Ant-Man movie is the same, like Edgar Wright was attached to this movie or from 2006 up until he left mid-production of the actual movie, which is part of what was made me so upset, is because he'd been working on this for so long and it just got taken away from him. But yeah, that's the original lineup. What a weird lineup, huh? But it's what they had. They didn't have Spider-Man. They didn't have the Hulk at the time before they cut a deal with Universal where they got the rights to make it, but Universal got, I think, a first deny option on distribution rights or something like that.
They basically something that just prevents them from making Hulk solo movies. If Hulk shows up in an Avengers film or in another film,
they can still make one. They just would have to share money with somebody, which Disney does not like. They don't like sharing money or creative control. Disney's very like weird. So the reason that I'm saying that this Captain America movie is the last kind of part of this plan and not like the upcoming Shang-Chi movie is that, to me, this is the last of these movies that feels like it wasn't fully made in-house. You know what I mean? There's still this sense that Marvel was collaborating with the studios. They worked with Universal, The Incredible Hulk, Paramount. They worked with on this one, and this is actually the last movie to actually been distributed by Paramount. They put the Paramount logo on the Avengers movie, but realistically, that was just kind of like a polite thing they did. And they went through all these like different pitches for the movie. Initially, the writer for Road to Perdition wrote a screenplay that would deal with like Captain America coming to terms with the fact that he's like a symbol from a bygone era and trying to figure out what it means to be Captain America now, which they clearly didn't go with. Now it feels like a lot of these movies are just written by in-house writers that make sure they fit into some sort of bigger, grander narrative. But here you get the sense that they let Marcus and McFeely, who are the writers on this movie, just kind of write the movie they wanted. I mean, they later had Joss Whedon do like some uncredited rewrites to make the tie better to the Avengers a little bit. But for the most part, it does feel like this is a movie that Disney was like, hey, we're making a Captain America movie, and eventually she's going to show up in some other movie, but here, like kind of do what you want with it. And I think a huge part of the charm of this movie is having Joe Johnston in the director's chair. Now, I've talked a lot about how I like the setting. I like this kind of like kitschy Americana vibe, but like it's America as you remember it if you watch like 80s movies. You know what I mean? Do you familiar with Joe Johnston at all?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen Jumanji and other stuff.
Have you seen October Sky?
I haven't seen October Sky.
That's
basically, like, I feel like I've seen his big movies, but like it's been a long time since I've really dug into anything by him. Well, until literally yesterday.
So, Stephen Marcus and what's the other guy's name? Stephen McFeely. Yeah, Stephen Marcus, Stephen McFeely, who were the writers on the film. You may know them previously as the writers on the Chronicles of Narnia movies, believe it or not, before they started writing on this. So you already have this kind of like wholesome blockbuster big movie thing. Joe Johnston, he's directed many big effects movies that you might remember from your childhood. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Jumanji, The Rocketeer. Those are great movies to have under your belt. Those movies really capture something about, I think, childhood. The Rocketeer really captures something about this like childhood wonder. October Sky is about someone trying to build a rocket in their backyard. Like he has all these movies that capture this sense of like childhood wonder that I think we like to imagine existed in like the 1940s and 50s. But he also has a long history of working in special effects. And you be in fact familiar with some of the stuff he's worked on. He was a visual effects artist and art director on a little trilogy called Star Wars, which I think you've seen those movies.
I'd have to go through like my backlog, but yeah, it sounds familiar.
Yeah. Might be in your letterbox somewhere. He worked on special effects, and his contributions include things like designing Boba Fett's armor, drawing the original concept art for AT-ATs. He's partially credited with helping design Yoda, the Ewoks, the Millennium Falcon, and X-Wings, which if you enjoy any of those things, thank Mr. Joe Johnston. If you go on Amazon, you can find he published his sketchbooks with all of his concept art from those movies. They are very expensive because they were like published like the year after each of those movies came out. But I think you could find like various articles and things talking about his contributions. But when you often hear people talk about how like, oh, George Lucas, he takes too much credit for Star Wars, it's kind of because of people like Joe Johnston, who did a lot of the lion's share of creating what I think is one of the most powerful things about Star Wars, which is the designs of things. Those iconic images he had a hand in. He also has an Academy Award for special effects for his work on another big pop culture milestone, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And on top of all of that, he designed the Iron Giant. Like, he literally came up with the design for that amazing Vin Diesel voice robot in the Iron Giant. So yeah, I have a lot of respect for Joe Johnston, his body of work. He's one of those like unsung heroes, I think, because when you think about how much of your childhood was enriched by Star Wars, Indiana Jones, the Iron Giant, I think it's hard to overstate how much those things had an effect on it. So it doesn't surprise me that when you watch Captain America: The First Avenger, one of the things that sticks out is these look like all of the technology, all of like the Hydra stuff. It looks like stuff you'd see in like a pulp magazine or sci-fi magazine from the 40s and 50s. And to me, that's one of the strongest things about it is the strong visual distinctiveness, where even when you look at something like Guardians of the Galaxy, which looks cool and I like the designs of everything, it looks a little grimier than everything else. It still definitely feels like it takes place in the same universe as all these other movies, which isn't a bad thing, but I think it robs the film a little bit of some of its identity.
Talking about all the pulpy stuff and everything made me think of like this movie is the closest we'll get to a Wolfenstein movie,
Yeah.
which for those who don't know is basically just like also basically like what if Nazis were badder? What if Nazis did more evil things? And kind of also then develops into like an alternate timeline thing. But another similar thing, just thinking back to what we talked about in the beginning, like what I really felt was the linchpin for the film's transition into nonsense. The Wolfenstein games have just a horrible understanding of how women work and like treatment of women. So it only made sense that like a film that is the closest to a Wolfenstein movie is probably also written by people who've never touched a woman or talked to a woman or done anything in the presence of another woman. So it's just like it's just to me fits the setting and time period very well.
Yeah, where Natalie Dormer just going to grab Captain America and plant one on him for like no discernible reason.
Like that was what she was paid to do to come.
Yeah.
Like she had to come in and probably sit for several hours in makeup and have to get an outfit just right, just to sit there and do nothing. Sounds, yeah, it's a Wolfenstein movie. Like if I just squint a little, like the blue and all the poppy electric weaponry and oh yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. I I I think this is a great looking movie. So yeah, overall, I think I like this movie. I liked it more than I thought I would rewatching it because my rewatching of Incredible Hulk went so poorly. And
Sorry.
overall, like a lot of the phase one and some of the phase two films just kind of feel been there, done that. Like you feel like you've already seen this movie, even if you haven't specifically seen it, you feel like you've already seen it by proxy of having watched the other films. There just really isn't a lot that's particularly distinct about them. But this one, I think, has enough character and charm to it to sort of justify it and being part of a rewatch. And I think the big thing, I think this kind of would transition to kind of what we want to talk more about, which is we talk about like themes, we talk about, you know, what's something like spiritual we could take from the movie, what's something that we can sort of apply to our lives. And I think, not to be redundant, but at the heart of this film is Captain America as a character who I think I might have said in the podcast, but I've heard other people echo the sentiment, which is if you want to talk about who the best on-screen Superman is, it's Captain America in the MCU. Like he is this embodiment of an idealized version of what American values are, and in a way that's like selfless but simultaneously like accessible to any sort of culture that's watching it. You know, and you get into the Avengers. There's a great scene in the Avengers where Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner is approaching him, and I think they're talking about like, "What's your name?" And he's like, "Bruce, but I go by another name." And I'm paraphrasing, and he's like, "Oh, that's the only name that's important to me."
Yes, yeah. He's like he says something more directly. He basically says he's heard about him. And he's like, "You heard about the other guy?" And he's like, "Well, that's not the one I'm interested in," or something like that.
Yeah,
But what he's really interested in is Bruce as a man, as a character,
as a human being.
as a human being. So yeah,
Yeah,
is a human being.
He's a real human
A
being.
real human being.
And that's just the whole glue that holds the whole movie together for me. And that's what holds subsequent, like, I think his character arc is one of the overarching arcs of the entire franchise. Him and Iron Man, they're the intertwined people who have these vastly different ideas of what it means to be a hero and what it means to save the world. And you have this altruistic, I believe in the potential and the good in people in Captain America that carries him throughout Winter Soldier, Civil War, and eventually the conclusions of the Avengers films. And I think that's really, if you want to talk about something that you can sort of look at, it's just, there's just this pure-hearted angel on screen who just loves people and wants to protect them. He doesn't want to kill people. He will if he has to, which I think is super interesting, where there's all this debate about, like, oh man, Superman snapped Zod's neck. Oh man, Batman shoots people in Batman vs Superman. All this debate about it. And then when you watch all of the Marvel movies, Iron Man and Captain America are just constantly killing people.
Yeah.
And it's totally fine because Captain America is killing super Nazis. So that's okay. And he's a soldier. And he's doing what is right in the best way he can. Where what is the right thing to do in a situation? I gotta kill some Nazis. Iron Man, I gotta kill some terrorists. And it's totally like fine because they exist. You talk about a grounded real world. Well, World War II and Middle Eastern conflict, that's pretty grounded real world. So like they're just fighting the good fight, you know? Yeah, I just think it's like you talked about you were texting me while watching it and you're like, you gotta talk about the propeller scene.
At least 10 minutes.
That scene is so awesome because it is the most starkly violent thing in the movie. For those who are wondering, there's a scene, like, first off, again, talking about designs of technology, the super missiles that the Nazis have, they're
piloted.
They're piloted missiles with propellers on them. It's awesome. And some poor Hydra guy, poor evil Nazi, has to pilot the missile into the places that Red Skull's trying to bomb. And while Captain America's on one of these, he's a guy's back, and the guy just falls and just gets like liquefied by the propeller.
And you hear
I
like
saw this in theaters.
You
hear
like when you, yeah, like when you touch a fan that's spinning.
Yeah,
and it's just
like you just threw something in the shredder. Yeah,
I remember that scene comes out of nowhere during like the last 20 minutes where it's just really boring and really like I was starting to fall asleep, and then that happened, and I just started laughing immediately because I was like, I just didn't expect. Yeah. It's so funny because doesn't he like rip him out of the bomb pilot seat and just like throw him in it? I can't remember if he falls off or if like Captain America initiates.
So
this,
that guy is like on like they're struggling, and that guy kind of just falls. But then what happens is there's that guy piloting it, and Captain America just like pulls that guy's like emergency like thing, and that guy just shoots in the air, and I guess he's just still in the ocean to this day somewhere. Yeah. That's it. He straight up he uses a gun in this movie. He just has a gun.
And he does in Avengers too. I remember.
Yeah,
I think Avengers.
He shoots an Uzi.
Yeah, the Avengers like came out after the Dark Knight, right? I think the Dark Knight released 2007, so all of these are after like Dark Knight 2007 or 8.
Dark Knight Rises. No, that was in 2013. Sorry.
It took way too long because they were like, wait a minute, Heath Ledger's dead. How do we make a sequel?
Yeah, Dark Knight's 2008, Dark Knight Rises 2013.
That's crazy to think about.
2 big superhero movies came out in 2008, and Dark Knight was not the most influential and important one. Isn't that crazy?
Was it Iron Man?
Iron Man.
Iron Man was the other one. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, only one of them's got an Oscar, so. But yeah, it's. I remember sitting in the theater, and this is talking about Avengers, but it's Captain America related, so it's cool. It's cool, man. It's kosher. But I remember like he starts shooting a gun at somebody, and like being just a big Batman fan growing up and like loving the comics and knowing that like, you know, the right way to write him is that he doesn't kill people. And if he does kill people, it's because of some like, you know, it's the testing of his moral standing.
Well, if you have Batman kill, then your movie's super mature and deep.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. That's what I've heard from.
That's all you need to do.
Particular Zack Snyder, but
even that's been done a million times now. But
yeah, it's like it's not new.
Guys, I have an idea. What if he shot somebody?
Oh Oh my goodness. What if he caused car crashes? And then we didn't watch him actually do anything. But you go from like Batman, who's like doesn't kill people, and his moral thing is that like people can always grow, and then Captain America, who's like, there's good in people, but I'm still gonna shoot somebody if I need
But
to.
war is
It's
war.
just like I remember being like, this is weird, but now I'm like watching, I'm like, it makes sense. I get it.
He's a soldier.
He's a
Yeah.
soldier. Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Which makes a lot more sense than Iron Man being like, it's not a weapon. And he just like puts guns in it. Well, it's not a weapon, but it's just a
It's
flight.
a lot of weapons.
It's a flight suit, but I have missiles in it. Like, okay, what are you going to use those for if it's just a flight suit?
That's like peak, like guns don't kill people, bullets do kind of like argument.
You just got to be real about it and just do what Weird Al says. Guns don't kill people. I do. Like it's just...
That's John LaJoie.
Was that? I remember
LaJoie. Weird Al would never make a song that filthy.
No, it's in. I think that's in UHF.
Is it?
Doesn't he make a clip in UHF and he's like, guns don't kill people, and then it zooms up on him and he's like, I do.
Is it? Solid joke for two different comedians.
There's also the Gandhi 2. It's the sequel to Gandhi 1,
Yeah.
and he's like in a library killing people. It's just like so bad. Yeah, maybe I just have like a vague memory of watching some sort of movie. It's like a traumatic event where like someone just says I kill people instead. I don't know. Just related that.
Well, John LaJoie's YouTube song called "Guns Don't Kill People." I kill people with guns. It's great. But I mean, what did you take away from the movie? Like,
I think as far as like takeaway from this film is concerned, like this is one of those experiences where like I really only enjoy taking things away from movies that either like connect with me. So like The Last Broadcast is something that people most would be like, that's not a good movie. But like to me, it just connects with me. And so like I take away from it like things that are just that touch me and engage me. But like Captain America is in that place where like it's doesn't connect with me because like it kind of just falls off. Like I'm really into it. You're carrying me to a direction that I'm enjoying. And then halfway into it, the movie decides I'm just not interested in being good anymore. Like I've gotten you to stay for an hour. You're not going to leave. Like there's no reason for me to try hard. And so I just don't know if I can say like, honestly, I've taken something away from this. In fact, one of the continued difficulties of covering the MCU on Syndoc will be the fact that people might tune in and be like, because this is a Christian podcast, I know that if I'm listening, I'll get something worthwhile. And like, I really hope that's true. But I also think it's appropriate to say like what you get from me that I believe is worthwhile is like some movies are just, there's nothing to take from them unless they connect with you. And this is one of those movies where I don't take anything from it. It's just sort of pulp fun. And I finished it and I don't know if I'll rewatch it until like a decade later or even 2 decades when I have a child and they're like, can we watch these? And I'm like, yeah, only fast forward the stuff in phase 1 that's sexual. And it's just like strangely sexual. It's just weird. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, I don't know if I could really sit back and say like, this is what I took from it. And dear listener, when you're listening, you could take this too. Like, I don't think you could. Like, it's just, I don't know.
It's the argument of like, what is the value of just movies that are decent or pretty good or okay, you know?
Or even thinking like the Sunday comics, like what's the value of the Sunday funnies? Like I don't get anything for all you old listeners, because I know we have demographic that's over 65, but like when you're reading the Sunday funnies, it's easy to discard them as like nothing, but like they actually do have value. And so like in that sense, yeah, okay, Captain America, the First Avenger has value just being a fun movie to watch, but like I can't step away and say like I've learned something about myself. I've learned something about, like I was talking about earlier, where like there is probably there is bits of an interesting story of a meek man becoming powerful and then having to realize the difficulty of that, like the scene in the bar where he's like, I can't even get drunk. But like they don't really run with that. And then at that point I'm like, okay, there's nothing more to take except for Red Skull has cool prosthetics. That's about it.
Okay, I mean that's fair. I mean like the movie's big point is fairly basic, you know. Like it doesn't. The good soldier is not someone who's really physically strong. It's a good man. You know, that's not revolutionary. I don't think anyone's life will change by that.
And that's even like, And that's even like the Jesus story. I mean, Jesus wasn't a fair man like David. He was just looked like a normal dude. And so to that end, like, yeah, I can take that. But like also I get that from the gospel story. And I don't want to do that thing where we've mentioned this before. In fact, you did, where it's like, you know, if our plan is to just watch movies that are better, we'll just watch, Citizen Kane on repeat. And it's
Yeah.
like that's not how you do it. But
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't know. It's not really, it doesn't offer me a different perspective. And I think that's what I kind of go for when I watch
Yeah.
movies. Is like I kind of want to be challenged a little bit. And I felt like I was about to be challenged, or at least greatly entertained. And then like the second hour hits and it's just not, neither really entertaining or challenging.
Yeah, because they start off with some stuff about like American propaganda, and that's an interesting thing, or like how superheroes or an American iconic character like Captain America can be used to send a message more than actually do something useful, and that's all kind of just evaporates as the movie goes along, or they just shed all those kind of like interesting ideas just to watch a dude throw a shield at people, which isn't the best. It's kind of a thing of like, do you want like it's a comfort food versus something nourishing kind of thing, where like,
Yes.
these are comforting ideas, and I will never get tired. This is just a thing with it. I never get tired of watching a movie where somebody learns a lesson about self-sacrifice and doing the right thing, even if it's difficult. Those messages will always connect with me. I enjoy that, like Thor. Like Thor is just about a guy having to learn to be sacrificial in order to be a hero. And again, they don't reinvent the wheel. There's some interesting things in there with like, you have Kenneth Branagh, who's like a Shakespearean director directing Thor. And you have Anthony Hopkins playing Odin, and there's all this like grandeur and like majesty on screen. And then he fights a big metal dude that doesn't even have like any defining features,
Yeah.
Or again, there's this interesting stuff, and I like all the fish out of water humor in that movie. But you could also, go the rest of your life without seeing it, and you wouldn't really miss anything, which is kind of the big, I think, Achilles heel of all these early MCU films, where they're not bad, but you're not missing a lot. It does make the Avengers a little bit more enjoyable because you're more familiar with the characters, but you could also probably watch that movie on its own and get pretty entertained regardless.
Can confirm that like the Avengers does a good job of setting the stage for every character that you'll get enough definition by the end that everything's fine.
Even if you didn't see Hawkeye and Thor,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Which, by the way, when I saw Avengers, I didn't see Thor and I didn't see Incredible Hulk before I saw Avengers in theaters, and I was, wasn't missing out on anything. So perfectly fine. You don't even see Hawkeye shoot an arrow in Thor.
Nope.
He just gets ready. But
he almost does.
Yes.
And you see Agent Sitwell, who's kind of a big MCU character in Thor. So if you're a nerd like me, that stuff kind of matters. But I mean, do you want to hear some Easter eggs and stuff? So I thought it would be better with, rather than trying to sprinkle all these various Easter eggs and references throughout the episode, if we just had a section at the end where I could sort of name the ones that I thought were interesting, as opposed to just, constantly just throwing bits out there like I did during the Incredible Hulk. So, and for the record, I don't think it's a fun Easter egg if it's something like, oh, if you look at his driver's license, the dates on there, like spell out his first comic appearance. Like that stuff I'm not particularly interested in. I'm more into stuff that I guess interesting is relative. This is just stuff I like. I'm sorry if you don't like it, but these are things that stick out to me. I have Easter eggs and universe building, the things that kind of, I think if you're kind of an MCU nerd, this is stuff that you care about and are interested in. The first really big thing is during the Stark Expo, did you notice anything prominent?
I don't know if I'd say prominent, but there was that suit that my wife and I saw in the one, there's like a display room and then there's a red suit. And she said that was a particular character.
Yes, your wife is correct. That is an android by the name of Jim Hammond, better known by the name, drum roll, Melvin, Human Torch. And he actually, in the comics, he predates the Johnny Storm character from the Fantastic Four. This is the original Human Torch. So, which is kind of interesting to me, similar to like things like Man-Thing gets referenced throughout the MCU. He's mentioned in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He's mentioned in Thor Ragnarok. This is interesting to me because that means that there is a synthetic man android that can shoot flames that's just walking around in the MCU somewhere. It's weird to me that they have this huge character who's just there, standing there, and he's never brought up again. I don't know if it's because there's some legal thing with the name Human Torch, but yeah, so in the Stark Expo, there is a Human Torch guy. That was interesting, huh, Melvin?
Is that like thinking about like there's just somebody out there that like could actually contribute? Is this like the equivalent of like Iron Man 2's hammer still being like alive but just never being used anymore?
Kinda, yeah.
It's like, I mean, it's not the same entirely because Hammer was in a movie, but like, how
Yeah.
do you have Sam Rockwell on your roster and just not bring him back?
I don't know. He's Hammer Tech is still alive and well. They're mentioned in Luke Cage. His company's still making weapons. I don't. Yeah, Sam Rockwell has made comments suggesting that he actually would be really totally down to play the character again. He'd love to come back, but who knows? I don't know if like Iron Man 2 is also similar to Incredible Hulk, where there's just this stuff in it that just doesn't come back ever again. I don't know. Yeah. I think the weird thing is that this character is canonically clearly stated to exist in the 40s. So who knows if he'd even still
That
be
too.
alive? But
That
I mean,
too.
he's an android, so
He's an android. They already are doing movies that are set in the past anyway, which I
yeah,
guess like they broke that down because they already were planning to do time travel. Massive spoilers for a comic book universe. Of course, there's time travel. So
yeah,
it's just like, why not? But also, like, what a cool character.
yeah. It's a cool character, and time travel exists. Has been Doctor Strange. There's this whole sequence where they talk about the different types of time travel that exist. There's time travel in the Runaways. There's time travel in Agents of Shield, and there's of course time travel in Endgame. So I don't know. There's no rules anymore. You can do whatever you want.
No, time travel can always do whatever it wants, and that's the
Yeah.
problem.
There's time travel. We've got magic. We have weird science. We have alien technology. If you start complaining about like logic and stuff in these movies, it's just there's only so much I can sympathize with your complaints. So anyway, J.J. Field's character, James Montgomery Falsworth, who you may remember as the British member of Cap's Howling Commandos team. I'm sure that character, that iconic character, really stuck with you. He's the British guy. If in the comics, he's a character called Union Jack. Union Jack is interesting because in the comics, Union Jack is part of a group called the Invaders, who were led by Captain America and their team on missions during World War II. So they're never called this in the movie, but the team is essentially a group called the Howling Commandos, who are like a World War II squadron. Initially in the comics, they were like a group led by Nick Fury, but as the comics went along, Nick Fury can't be like 100 years old, so they just slowly retcon things. But they also mixed them with the idea of the Invaders. And the Invaders lineup was made up of Captain America, Bucky, Human Torch, this one that's in the movie, funnily enough, Toro, and Namor, before Union Jack added them. So they added all these things together. They added the Howling Commandos and the Invaders together to form this like team in the movie. Here's a weird tidbit though. James Montgomery Falsworth's costume in the movie is inspired by a character with the amazing name of Pinky Pinkerton. Poor guy. But then on the show Agent Carter, Pinky Pinkerton shows up there as a member of the Howling Commandos with the exact same outfit. So there's just randomly two different guys on this team that have the exact same outfit and look the same.
It's the second case of Next Time Baby.
Yeah, it's the next time, baby. And so, of course, here's the big thing for MCU fans is that the movie essentially spawned a whole TV show. There was a one-shot called Agent Carter, which was fairly well received, and it led to a 2-season TV show by the same name. The show was interesting because it actually was produced by Kevin Feige. So it is, unlike a lot of the television shows, it is very clearly established as canon to the point where James Darcy plays Jarvis, like a physical human Jarvis on the show who assists Peggy Carter. And he shows up in Endgame, assisting an older Howard Stark. Speaking of which, Dominic Cooper actually does play Howard Stark in the show. Dum Dum Dugan makes an appearance. These characters also cross over to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and it's been confirmed that the final season of S.H.I.E.L.D. will involve time travel and will in fact cross over with Agent Carter, which gives people a lot of hope because Agent Carter, in case you're feeling like watching the 2-season show, it ends on a huge, massive cliffhanger. So just be prepared for that. But I like the show. Have you ever checked it out?
I haven't watched any of the Marvel TV shows, including the Netflix ones. I think Kat and I like started The Punisher and watched like 2 episodes, but I don't know what it is, but I can watch 6 movies in a row, but I can't watch a single season of a show without just being like, but I could watch 6 movies instead. I don't know why. Like my brain just thinks there's a difference, but for me, there just is. So nope, haven't watched almost anything that is a Marvel TV show.
That'll be our next series of the podcast. We're gonna
That's
watch
my biggest fear about
The Runaways. We're gonna watch Cloak and Dagger. We're gonna watch...
I'm so afraid of Disney Plus like focusing so much on these shows though. Like, so you have WandaVision and everything else that's coming up, which when I really say that, I mean WandaVision and everything else that everyone knows exists but probably isn't that interested in. And like I just hope that they're not that connected to the movies, because I really don't I don't want to have to watch those also. And I know that like did you hear this, that like the new Doctor Strange will probably connect with WandaVision? And like,
yes, I was about to say, like, it's probably fairly important.
Like, I don't know. Can I commit to that? Like, I can't right now.
So these shows are supposed to be like 6 or 7 episode shows.
Good.
So.
Make it 3.
You mean the length of a single movie is what you want?
Yes. Just make TV movies. I don't care.
I mean,
I just can't do it, man. I don't know why. It's like my brain's like,
I could do 7 solid episodes of something. My issue with like the Netflix shows is that a lot of them are like forced to do like 13 episodes when they have about 8 episodes of story. And I think that's what kills a lot of Netflix shows for me. And I really like Daredevil and Jessica Jones specifically. I think those shows are great. But man, does every single one of those Marvel Netflix shows have that like mid-season drag where there's just no reason for the season to be that as long as they commissioned it.
This is why I'm so afraid of the fact that like Stranger Things season 4 is going to be next year, because as a movie podcast, it only makes sense that you would have to talk about Stranger Things and lead up for that. And yeah. I just don't want to watch them again, and I don't want to get through season 2 again, because we haven't even finished it. We like, Kat and I were like, oh, Dead by Daylight has the Demogorgon now as a new creature. We should just finally finish season 2. And we watch one more episode and we're like, this is terrible. Like, it's just, can't do it, man. I know that there's a lot of Stranger Things stans, but I can't.
Season 3 is a lot better. Season 3 is a lot better.
I don't know, man. Can I do that? I don't know.
Well, so just so you know, Agent Carter, both seasons total come to 18 episodes between total. First season's 8 episodes, second season's 10 episodes. So if you ever want to do that on the podcast, that won't be such a big commitment. I think it's pretty good. It follows Peggy Carter trying to be a woman in a man's world as she tries to run S.H.I.E.L.D. There's some fun continuity stuff in it. It's a period piece that takes place in the 40s, which I really enjoy.
Is it on D+?
I think so. I think it's on Disney+.
Because I love how like now you just don't know. Everyone's accepted the fact that Disney Plus is not everything we thought it was.
Yeah, Incredible Hulk's not on there.
Yeah, and neither Spider-Man is on there.
Yep.
I don't think they have the old Spider-Man cartoon, but they don't have Homecoming or Far From Home, last I heard. So it's like,
I don't think they ever will, unless they buy out the distribution rights.
Sony. I love that. Like, first off, this will be the shortest tangent, and I always have to say that because they always inevitably turn wrong, and now everyone can just be patient and loving and forgive me. But I love that the movie industry is so petty right now, and I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Like, I don't know why people watch reality television when real life is just as exciting. It's just great. See, I cut that one off really quick. That's great.
That was good. That was a lot of restraint, Melvin. I appreciate that. And here's a fun tidbit for everyone. Speaking of Spider-Man, Kenneth Choi plays Howling Commando Jim Morita in this movie. And Kenneth Choi reappears in Spider-Man Homecoming as Principal Morita, the son of his previous character. There's even a photograph of Jim Morita in his office. And there's a deleted scene in The Avengers where Chris Evans is reading through various lists of his former Howling Commandos mates, and 2 of them are confirmed to be deceased, and Jim Morita is sadly one of them. Thank you for your service, Jim Morita. That's a fun continuity. I like stuff like that. I like they just have like the same actor show up and play like their own ancestor and own. Remember in Captain America in the movie where there's a scene where like he's signing autographs and then one blonde woman comes up and is really excited to meet him.
Mm-hmm. I do.
That same actress shows up as Peter Quill's mother in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and James Gunn has gone on Twitter being like, "Oh yeah, that's her grandma. If you want to think that, I guess." Like, hey, whatever, you weirdos. If everything has to connect to you guys, you know.
I love how James Gunn is just like, I literally only like the Guardians. That's all I care about. That's all I'll invest.
He pitched a Moon Knight movie. He really wanted to do a Moon Knight movie.
I think if he channeled his early filmography.
You mean Super?
Just
do that. I love that movie.
This Moon Knight shows up in a line and hits somebody over the head with a hammer while like triumphant music plays.
Don't butt in line.
I like that was like the only scene I knew about for years, and like it was early on, and like
oh man,
like I didn't know anything
There's
about
so much in that movie.
I didn't know anything about it, and it was almost like out of context. It's almost traumatic because it's so violent. Because I just didn't. There's a thing my dad says about like teach. My dad teaches middle school, and he says the fun part about middle school is like, even though kids don't understand satire, they have the energy to learn it. But the problem is that sometimes they still don't understand satire. And I think in my case, I saw that scene like around middle school. So like I didn't get the satire of what was going on. So I was like, this is so scary and that is so mean. But like now I'm like, I love it. This is great. Like a real life superhero would just really be a jerk. It's just awesome. Oh man. It's still probably terrible. I probably won't watch it, but yeah, give me Moon Knight where it's just basically super. It's just awesome.
Brightburn and Super apparently exist in the same universe. Did you know that?
Yeah, because what's his name at the end of Brightburn is the
there's like a newspaper clipping of the Crimson Bolt, like just for some reason.
Brightburn's so bad too. It's so bad. It is nothing worthwhile. The only thing that was worthwhile was my episode, because I basically talk about what if and then just talk about that instead. So go listen to that. Go listen to the archives, the Syndoc archives. Yay.
So I don't know if you picked up on this, but I'm a pretty big MCU guy, if you haven't noticed.
Yes, I'd say so.
Yeah, it's
that you're the only one carrying these MCU
episodes. So like MCU for me is very much kind of like my Star Wars, in that it's like this big monster that I just have fun following, and I love criticizing it when it's bad, and I love praising it when it's good, which I don't like talking about all the time, because like I feel like that colors people's perception of you too much. Or like if Wonder Woman 84 is like bad, for example, and I say like I didn't like it, people be like, well, he's just an MCU fanboy, even though I spent like a whole episode talking about how much Incredible Hulk sucks, and I think Iron Man 2 is bad, and I think there's a lot of flaws in these movies, but like it doesn't matter. Like now that I've said that, I like these movies, and I like specifically like all the fun continuity stuff, and I've seen all the shows, people be like, oh, this guy's an idiot. Like he doesn't know real cinema, he doesn't know real movies, and that will just create this bias against me.
I love how there was that short, I mean, it was short-lived because Zack Snyder, but there was that short period where people considered the DC movies was the real cinema of like pop culture. Like if you wanted to really be cool, you had to watch the Marvel or the DC movies, and then that got shut up real quick. And like now it almost feels like I don't see anybody arguing the position of DC movies are more real anymore online at all. And I think that's purely because of Batman vs Superman, and then Suicide Squad, just like insult to injury.
And then Justice League, yeah.
And then Justice League was just so lifeless. And now we're in a position where it's like Marvel is very comfortable where it is, and DC is still kind of like charismatically figuring out what it wants to do, because Aquaman just doesn't care, and that's why it's fun. Shazam is fun for two reasons. One, because it's a director showing that they've really grown. Like that is what's his name again? I forget.
Lights Out guy.
Yeah, whatever his name. Sorry, I know you probably don't listen to us, but you've grown, and that's really cool. And then even Joker is just like this weird $1 billion micro budget movie, and all of that's very endearing, but nobody anymore is going, I really hope nobody's ever going like, DC is if you want to be really cool with cinema, it's DC now. And then it's like, no, they're still just the same. Like these are all just the same.
I'll like, hey, if you think I'm an MCU fanboy, all you need to know is I think Crisis on Infinite Earths, that that corny, silly, big crossover is one of the best crossovers I've ever seen. You got to see Tom Welling's Superman like and have this like really touching, beautiful scene. You got to see 2002 Birds of Prey show get wiped from existence. Apparently, you got to see
the only thing
the
that,
90
that can like recover, like if because at this point, from your perspective, I guess you would say like DC has succeeded in the ultimate crossover as far as like because of Crisis of Infinite Earths. I assume in comparison, the only thing the MCU can do to top that is if they somehow tie in Roger Corman's Fantastic Four into the canon of the MCU.
Yeah, what needs to happen? Multiverse of Madness. This whole movies experiment is a waste if there isn't scenes where Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch just like visit other Marvel movies. Like if there isn't a scene where they see like Ben Affleck Daredevil and like Nicolas Cage Ghost Rider, like then it's what's the point? You know what I mean? Like if they don't go see the like JD Salinger's son Captain America movie, or if they don't see like
early Josh Brolin Thanos, which looks so bad now because it's prosthetics instead of CG, so it just looks like so gross.
Like I want to see Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland Spider-Man all in a scene together. I want to see Thomas Jane, Dolph Lundgren, and Ray Stevenson Punisher get killed by John Bernthal Punisher. Like that's what I want, and that's the crossover you need. Like,
but it's
they
not
could,
gonna happen.
and they could. That's the thing. There's this weird thing where Kevin Feige doesn't even want to cross over with the stuff that's technically canon. So like, it's frustrating. So
that's the show, everybody.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Cinematic Doctrine. If you've seen Captain America the First Avenger, what did you think of it? Is this film a fun, pulpy period piece with a superhero flair? Or does that second half get a bit too overbearing for its own good? If you're listening on Cinematic Doctrine's website, let us know in the comments below or shoot us an email to cinematicdoctrine@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, consider leaving a review for the podcast on your respective podcast app at the end of this episode. Unlike YouTube or Reddit, there isn't really a way to let us know how we're doing with a thumbs up or thumbs down. So the best way to leave your thoughts on the podcast is to write a review on iTunes, Podchaser, or wherever you listen. And as mentioned before, Cinematic Doctrine has a Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you're opted into a once-a-month movie poll where you decide a movie we discuss on the podcast. You also gain access to the Syndoc Pre-Show, a Patreon-exclusive podcast series where my co-host Daniel and I casually talk movies, Christianity, and life itself. There are other unique benefits that come with supporting the podcast, so be sure to check that out at patreon.com/Cinematic Doctrine. A special shout out to those who supported the Art House Theater tier on Patreon. Thank you so much, Mom, Dad, and Melanie. You guys are the best, and your continued monetary support is greatly appreciated. All of this will be available in the show notes. Until next time, stay cool. Want some Cinematic Doctrine swag? You're in luck! We've got 3-inch Cinematic Doctrine logo stickers exclusive for Patreon supporters. Perfect for your travel mug or laptop. Head over to patreon.com/Cinematic Doctrine, link in the show notes, and choose the Independent Theater tier. Doing so will net you other perks too. But let's be real, the podcast stickers are the coolest perk. So get yourself some podcast stickers by supporting on Patreon.